Yes, and I do have a link that I'm going to send to everyone.
Okay.
Well, I'll say hello to everyone. My name is Susan Thornton, and I'm chair of Immigrant Pathways Colorado. It's my pleasure to welcome you tonight to this special conversation with noted Colorado author, Dr. Juanis Kang Lual. As many of you know, Immigrant Pathways Colorado is a community-supported nonprofit that makes small self-development grants, we call them, to hardworking immigrants who are in the country legally and who have very low income. Our grants are for things like learning English, applying for citizenship, training to become a medical or dental technician, training to get a commercial driver's license, a whole range of things, and really whatever will raise the family's standard of living and help them feel more connected to the community. We also provide scholarships to immigrant students who are studying at Arapahoe Community College. We depend on donors like you to help people from around the world who want to build a better life for themselves and their families in our community. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our co-hosts for this evening, both of whom are on Immigrant Pathways board. First, Jennifer Gadish, who's a member of Immigrant Pathways board and managing director at the African Community Center, which I believe is where she met our guest tonight. Our other co-host is Julia Guzman, a talented immigration attorney and also a board member. And so take it away, Julia and Jennifer.
Well, all I'm going to say before I throw it to Jennifer is that if you would like to ask a question of our guest or anybody else, you can just chat in the little chat down there at the bottom. There's a little bubble, and just type your question in there. I'll be checking it. Otherwise, I'm going to let Jennifer introduce our very special guest. She went away.
You know, technology is wonderful.
Sure.
When it works.
As well as a board member of Immigrant Pathways Colorado. So I'm really honored to be here with you tonight and to be sharing my friend with us, with our group, and his story. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about South Sudan to set some context for our discussion. And then I have some questions I'll be asking Juanis that he'll answer for us.
Oh, you get muted.
Well,
We've lost your sound
We
again.
her bandwidth is low, so it's kind of coming in and out a little bit.
Oh, okay.
63% of these refugees are children. So this issue is the result of a long-standing civil war, civil as well as intertribal war, lasting over 20 years. Since the early 1990s, more than 20,000 refugees were settled in the United States from South Sudan. About 1/5 of these were known as lost boys, but others came through the Family Resettlement Program through the U.S. Department of State. Several hundred of these families were resettled here in and around Denver and Boulder, starting in 1998, and they were resettled through Lutheran Family Services, Ecumenical Refugee Services, and the African Community Center. I actually met Juanis through the Rocky Mountain Welcome Center in 2019 when we began working on a census grant together. I was really inspired by Juanis's passion to help his community, to do outreach, to explain not only what the census is, but as we've moved into the COVID era. So I'm proud to call Juanis a friend. I'm even more honored that he considers me a mentor. So I'd like to ask you to please welcome him to our group tonight. Nice to see you, brother. So Juanis, your book, which I have my copy right here, I found very moving, and I liked a lot of the things that you said about it. And so I wanted to ask you if you would share with us your inspiration for writing this book. You know, who convinced you to write your story, and really what motivated you to share it with your readers?
Well, first of all, I want to give a shout out to you, Jennifer, and for everybody for tuning in, and also for coming in to hear a little bit about my story. So thanks so much for that. I don't know, we should start with a question, or we should start a little bit about how did I get here? Should I just go directly to a question, or should I start a little bit about my background?
You can share whatever you like.
Well, first of all, as Jennifer mentioned that I'm originally from southeastern part of South Sudan. I got a map here. I don't know, I'm going to be able to share it with you guys. Here's the map. Or it's just going to be delayed. Maybe it's just going to be delayed. So I'm from southeastern part of South Sudan, the world's newest republic, in a place called Nasser. So as Jennifer mentioned that this part of the world has been involved in conflicts and civil war. Initially started as two civil wars between between the south and northern part of the country until the independence in 2011. So after 2011, when the South seceded from the North, and then we also been dealing with a kind of like, initially started as a tribalistic conflict, which we're still dealing with it today, even though there's been a peace negotiation that going on in the last 2-3 years now. So I actually lost both of my parents. I'm one of those, I'm not kind of like one of those lost boys, but similarly stored as a lost boy, because I came with my family-in-law, my sister, husband, extended family when I came here in 2000. So we first got in Connecticut. That's when we were settled. We spent some time in Connecticut, in New York, because of some friends and family members who've been to the U.S. before we've been here. So the family decided that they want to move to join their relatives and family members. So we ended up leaving Connecticut to meet with the United States, like Minnesota, Iowa, Omaha, Nebraska. And then I had a cousin and his family who migrated here to Denver in early 2000. So while I was moving around in those places, so they decided to let me join them here in Denver, Colorado. So I didn't want to come in the first place, but I was like, well, let me go check it out. So I came to Denver in 2002. So since then, even though I've been going back, but Denver became home to me. So I went to high school here and moved on to college. I started at DU. Didn't work out well for me, but I ended up going to Metro State University, where I graduated with the bachelor degree in public relations and political science and computer information system. Now let's get to the question. What was the question again?
So the first question is, tell us a little bit about your inspiration for writing this book. Who convinced you to write it, and what motivated you to share your story?
Okay. This book, some of you saw the book. This is actually a series of different books. So I started off 300 pages. So 300 pages, and then I have a team. I have, back in 2000, when I was in college, in 2007, 2009, 2008, I had a dream that based on where I'm from, I remember that part of this inspirational are actually natural. And I actually steal it from my grandma. as I mentioned that I lost both of my parents in a young age. I lost my mom, actually, I didn't know until a few years ago that just 3 days old after she had given birth to me. So I was taken in by my grandma and my first, uncles and aunties. And at that time, this was in the middle of 1988, 1985, 86. So at that time, we were dealing with Sudanese civil war, second Sudanese civil war between southern and northern part of the country. So where our villages were actually being bombed and attacked consistently. So and then we would be forced to leave the area, go to either neighboring region or neighboring countries, or go to another area. And then when the thing calmed down a little bit, we would go back. So most of it has been actually has been instilled in me since I was 5 years old. So plus being traveled in those places where I spent many years in UN refugees camps. And luckily enough, when I came here, especially when I was in Connecticut, I always somehow, there's this magical, connection that is almost everywhere I went, I would meet the right people. I would meet the good people, people who would support me. So I remember even our co-worker, case worker in Connecticut, I remember I mentioned her name in the book, Miss Beggy. She was so kind to me. She was willing, really generous to me, where she would give me an extra help or take me to the places where I would get help. So this inspiration has been, I think, has been, a part of my life since I've been brought here. So long short story, in high school, when I moved to Denver, I was able to get connected with the people in all different academia, different industries, in colleges, university, in high school, counselor. So somehow there was some sort of a divine connection where these people, when I tell them my story, they were really inspired that they were like, well, maybe you should write a book one day. This was even back in high school. Even come out of high school, I did really think seriously to write, put this story together. Perhaps not only that, perhaps other people can be inspired, but also I felt that it was a good idea to, to share my story with them. So back then in 2005, 2006, my friend John Lethweb, who was the director of DU, would take me to the lunch every weekend. We would spend 1 hour, 2 hours just talking about, my dream, my vision, because I remember when I was 5 years old, based on where I'm from, where we didn't have basic at all. Not only just we were dealing with a war, but even I remember in my villages, not just my village, many part of the area where I'm from, in the southeastern part of the country, we did not have, whether it's school, whether a hospital, clinic, infrastructure, transportation, none of all of that. So being inspired with, coming from those kinds of, situation or condition, then I felt that, well, maybe sharing my story would help me to be able to make a connection, meeting with the right people, and perhaps I would be able to even raise some money to build a community, to build a project that I always wanted to do. So most of it have come from, kind of like natural, based on what I had gone through. Those situations, I even talk a little bit about the miracle, the miracle happened to me. Yet sometimes miracles do happen, including, I was told that my grandmother, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, whom actually lost her sight before I was born. And then the day or the few days I lost my mother, my natural mother, my birth mother, she was able to receive her sight without seeing any doctor or medicine man or medicine woman. So it's just been just this connection, divine connection.
Do that again. Oh, there we go. Okay.
Oh, I lost
All
you.
right. So in your book, you share a lot about your mentors and, you know, kind of just the strangers that you've met along the way who have supported you. I loved your story about the angel you encountered, by the way.
Yes,
but I'm wondering,
thanks.
could you talk about your experiences with the Americans that you met in Hartford and in Minnesota?
Okay.
And in Denver? You spend a lot of time talking about kind of the kindness of strangers and how that has impacted your life.
Sure. Yes, like I mentioned that we were, there were actually 5 of us plus a baby, 6 of us total as a family when we came here. So the first, when we got, I mean, it was, you know, there was a drama along the way, but when we got, for example, when we arrived in Chicago, you know, where we spent a couple of days there. And because I was young then, I was 15, and wherever we were staying, I would walk around and try to see what people were doing, what the people would look like. And it's strange enough, these people were staring at us, and some of them would, you know, walk up to us and ask us some questions about where we were coming from and where we were heading to and whether we knew anybody and who were taking care of us. And these people mostly were Caucasian, you know, and they were really great Caucasian people. You know, they were asking us a lot of questions, and some of the questions we didn't understand them, but we tried to, you know, do our best to answer those questions. So and then when we got into Connecticut, we were put into, which I didn't understand, but some of this neighborhood, which actually it was somewhat, it was the kind of like diverse neighborhood where we had, you know, all different, you know, all walk of life, you know, black, brown, and Caucasian or white. And then sometimes some of these people, Caucasian, would come to us and said, "Where you guys from?" You know, they would ask us a question. They were really wondering and puzzled, like, you know, what were we doing? Why we, you know, why we were there? You know, those kind of things. So, and then because we were new and even the language, you know, was not that strong for all of us. So we would just basically do our best to try to explain to them that why we've been here, why we came here, and try to tell them our story, where we were coming from. And some of them became our friend, and they became, you know, supportive. Where every weekend they would come and see us and ask us if there was anything we needed, if there was anything we wanted, if there was some sort of assistance or help we wanted. This was one of those things that you couldn't explain it. There's no explanation. You cannot explain it. And yes, in few cases, we would have strange people who would look at us like, like look at us like a stranger, you know, looking at us like not welcoming at all. But in most cases, we came across kindness people, really decent and generous people, supportive people. If that makes any sense.
Thanks for that. In your book, you speak a lot about the other projects that you hope to write. Stories about your family, stories about tribal histories, and even stories about childhood stories and childhood proverbs. So what are you writing about right now?
Right now, I'm working on 3 books. The second book is the second part of this book that came out, because the book, like I mentioned, that I came from 300 pages to now this is about 140 pages, this book, 45. So there's a second part that I'm working on, which is done, but I'm just going through some of the story that I missed or that I did not include into the book. Because, for example, I talk about kind of life in the villages, live in the villages where in a remote area, basically where you didn't have any technology or modern basic, where I remember the older people would tell kids kind of like a bedtime story, one upon a time those stories, kind of like a fiction book, fiction story, like what happened to them in their generation, or some of the funny stories they had or were told to them. So this is just a little bit in detail of some of these stories that I was told or were told to people who are actually older than me, like my siblings, and I was able to write them down. Or since I've been traveling there many times, so I was able to gravitate in writing those stories. So and put them in a book. So the second book is a fiction book. This is including some of the best funny stories that neither ever been told or were told, but I decided to, maybe need to, retell to the world. So again, the second book is the nonfiction, which is a part of these theater books. So the third book is a fiction, is a fiction book where I'm telling this story, kind of like one upon a time story that happened in real life, or maybe were just a fiction books that were told to them, like some of those dragons or like Chinese stories. So those are the projects I'm working on. Plus, I'm also working on my foundation projects, where I'm working on try to build a clinic, since there's no clinic there in my village, in that village where I'm from. As well, I'm working on business plans. So those are the projects I'm working on right now.
I know you're probably one of the busiest people I know.
Very extremely, extremely busy.
You amaze me. Some of the stories I really enjoyed in your book was when you talked about your grandmother, really, and her legacy and, what she did for you. And I just wondered if you would share something with us about her to honor her. We were talking about this last night and we said something.
Yep. Sure. Yes. My grandmother, whom her name is Nyaluk, Nyalu. Okay. And by the way, the names in this part of the world, it's not just Africa. I think most indigenous nations name have significant meanings. So my grandmother Nyaluk, which actually had a huge influence on my life, because she was the one that, well, it was not just her. So her and her kid, which referred to my uncle and my auntie, were the one that took me in, after I lost my mom. And by the way, in that part of the culture, even today, we still have that. So when a woman, a young lady is being married, so her firstborn, her first birth as to be given in her parent home or her parent house. So in this situation, so my mom was giving birth to me at her parent home. So I lost her, like I said, just 3 days after she had given birth to me. So my grandmother became a role model, to be honest. So she was the one that, like I said, made a lot of miracles happen. One of which that I just mentioned that she was able to receive sight. She was able to see and a doctor, even though there was no doctor, there was no nurses, there was no hospital at that part of the world at all. And nor, did she see any medicine man or medicine woman. As by the way, in my nation, I'm from a members of the Nuer people, Nuer tribe, or Nuer nation. We are a nation, we call ourselves a nation. So most of us, I would say probably 99.9% of us are a believer, whether they believe as Christianity or as a regular believer, whom actually believe, Almighty God, we call it Yahweh. So that miracle happened. So my grandmother became a role model for me. She was the one that cared for me after she was able to see, again, naturally. So we don't know what happened. And then the second miracle happened. She was able to bed feeding me in a young age. She was in her early 70s at that time. So she was the one that always telling me that she didn't see any color line in terms like she was always telling me it didn't matter who you are, we all are human family, we all are human race. She didn't see any white, black, brown race. She was always seeing one human race. So I learned that from her. So, and she was always telling me to treat everybody the same way as I would want her to be treated. It didn't matter what color of their skin those people were. So she got a big role on me, to be honest. Even when she passed on, and some of this thought actually that's gonna come out from next book. I didn't say everything's on the book, but she was a really inspirational role model to me.
That's nice. That's beautiful to hear. So one of the things that impresses me the most about you is how
Uh-oh.
Say it again.
She froze.
Oh, okay.
She froze. While she's unfreezing, we do have a question in the chat if you want to take a crack at that one. It's somebody asks if it's curious what the immigration process looks like to you compared with maybe what everybody else thinks it's like.
Well, to be honest, I remember that the immigration settlement program is one of those long journeys. It's one of those that you never know, you never knew whether you would be able to make it or be able to come. And I can even talk just for myself. It's spending about 6-7 years in the UN refugees camp. And I remember initially my sister and her husband, their kid, including me, had applied for what they call it a form, which is a part of application where the immigration would give to the refugees, and then they would fill that application, and then in some cases you don't hear anything from them. So at that time, yes, the process was a little faster than it is today. I think today is actually impossible, But back then, in the 90s and 2000, it was not as bad as it is today, to be honest. But again, it was a long process where even if you fill out the application, you had no idea whether you would be able to hear anything from them or not. like I said, the first application we fill out, we never heard anything from it. And then the second application, we heard about it 2 years later. It was 2 years later. Took us 2 years, we had no idea what was going on. So to answer your question, today is actually, it is impossible. It is really impossible to even think about whether you're going to be. I know even now I do have a contacts with in those places, whether in the refugees camp in Kakuma, in Kenya, or Ethiopia, or elsewhere. It's tough, you know. I know, and I was told that there's some people who actually fill out application for the immigration settlement 2-3 years ago. Even today, they have not heard anything about it or about them. So to answer your question, it's even tougher than it was in 2000 and in the 90s. But again, it was one of those fortunate. It was one of those lucky that you wouldn't know. Even people who did fill out the application, they never heard anything from them. Or maybe they paid the interview, or maybe they failed the process. So it was one of those things that you could not explain it. There's no explanation. I cannot explain it. It was just one of those divides.
Thank you. It looks like Jennifer's back. If you want to try your question again, Jennifer.
Oh, sure.
Jennifer, you back? Oh.
By all accounts, Juanis, you really shouldn't be here with us. I mean, the randomness with which your life changed is somewhat overwhelming. So I wanted to ask you about your foundation. I've always been impressed with how much you care about your community and wish to give back. And your foundation, called the African Sustainable Development Foundation, I'm wondering, could you tell us a little bit about that and what you
Yes.
hope to accomplish in South Sudan?
Absolutely. And by the way, I did send the links here. I don't know, you can see the link, the ASDF link website. So again, I started back in 2008, 2009. That's when I had a dream that I want to make a difference. I want to make an impact. And I want to start it in where I'm from, that part of the world where I'm from. So in 2008, this was when I was still in college. At that time, I transferred to Metro. And I remember being there, I was talking to my professors and friends and student friends about my dream, about what I want to do, and all of them were really, hey, girl, want to hear about it. And my first meeting, when I planned that meeting, was like 50 people show up. So a long short story, I started 2008, 2009 I graduated, and then 2010, that's when I went to work. So 2010, we raised quite like, good money in a couple months, raised about over $50,000. And first time I went back since I left in 1994. So we went back, I sent a team back. We were able to send some medical supplies, school supplies, materials back then. And then it kept going. And then 2011, 2012, and then 2013, in 3 years, we were operating, and we built some school. We done some work on sanitation over there. We done some project in healthcare for those 3 years period before now, before this current civil war, which is initially started as a genocide, occurred. So in late 2013, that's when the the current tribalistic that been going, even though now what became a civil war, it started. So we done some project at those 3 years. And then in that 2013, so it became dangerous for me, even with the team. So we decided to make some changes, including the organization name. Back then it was called NDO back then. And then in late 2016, that's when we did this, restructured organizations, and then since then, we've been working on particular healthcare. We've been working on education. Like right now, we're working and want to build a clinic in my village. And there's so many kids and youth who are now.
How much are you trying to raise for that?
Huh?
How much are you trying to raise for that?
Well, right now, for the clinic project, we just started. We just raised only $5,000 so far, and we're looking about $100,000. That's what.
You could build a clinic in South Sudan for $100,000.
Correct.
Wow.
So even with the book, I also been, and my team, we've been talking about how could we raise money through the book, and we just need help on getting the right people, marketing, who can help us get the word out, with the book. And we truly believe that, let's say we can find, even if it's a 5,000 people, buy the book, that net proceed can go toward this project. That's a plan. So we need help. Since we're dealing with pandemic last year and now this year, it's been tough. Been so difficult. So
when do you hope to go back?
Yes. As a matter of fact, right now we are in debate of sending myself, maybe 2 other people. This is spring, even next month, February. So we're still debating it. I mean, the coronavirus is not as bad over there as over here, we have over here. So it's only, they do have some cases in the big city, but in the remote area, there's none. Most people never even heard about it. There's something called, COVID, period.
A whole different world.
Yes, exactly. So I'm working on healthcare projects, and then, so here the list. So we're working on healthcare, and then we're also working, try to buy a community, a couple boats, because there's no infrastructure, there are no roads. Even it's so difficult when somebody gets sick to be taken to another region or another country. It takes days, and in most cases, people don't make it. They don't make it to a place. You talk about 100 miles to 150 miles away, where you can find a clinic. So we need a boat, a couple boats. The community has for a couple boats to be purchased for them. So when somebody for emergency, situation, even just for them to get from point A to point B, it's so difficult. There's no road, there's no vehicles, there's no car. So the only hope for them right now is the boat, because there's so many. There's like 4 or 5 different rivers there.
Okay.
They won't have any issue of getting around with the boat.
Well, Juanis, I want to thank you so much for answering those questions, but I would like to open the floor and see if any of our participants have any questions for you.
Okay, so they just had a question why you got disconnected.
Yeah, we read that one already. If I don't see any more in the chat that weren't answered, I know that he answered one that was in the chat. Jennifer, do you want to give those little tidbits that you wrote into the chat out loud for the people who aren't reading the chat about the statistics? Well, oh, did you mute? She got muted again. I can never figure out how to unmute you. There we go. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the items that I wrote in here is that less than 0.01% of refugees in the world, of which we are in really a crisis greater than what occurred in World War II. There are more than 78 million refugees and displaced people in the world. But really less than 0.01% of those refugees are actually ever resettled to a third country. And so there are hundreds and thousands of millions of lives left on hold while people wait in refugee camps for either a conflict to end, a government to change, or possibly resettlement to a third country. So the fact that Juanis is here is really a miracle in itself when you think about how many people were in the 2 refugee camps that you were in. There was also another question about, you mentioned 2 years, that it took you 2 years to wait for your paperwork to be processed. And that's standard. It's actually become longer over the Trump administration, but it takes between 18 months and 2.5 years for the United States to process the security clearance for a refugee to enter the country.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah.
Well, I know you would get disconnected. So what I was trying to say was, even that time in the 90s and 2000, the dispute process of immigration was not really bad as today. But even back then, like I was saying, that sometimes you're lucky enough that you are able to get access to that form, to that application. In most cases, you might not even heard anything about it anymore. You don't know what happened to it. Maybe somebody's thrown away, in the trash basket, or what happened with it, you have no idea. So basically what I'm trying to say is that I remember that our first application for immigration settlement was 90, I think it was 96, And again, there was like, I don't know, maybe 500,000 people, refugees in that camp, just one camp. Because Ethiopia and Kakuma camp, those were and still are the largest camp, I guess, on the continent. There might be some other camp too, like in Congos, and there's some refugees camp, or in Western Sudan, which is Darfur. So that first one, initially we didn't hear anything from it until 1998. That's when we applied for a different one, where it took us 2.5 years to hear from it. But long short story, today is actually impossible to even think about. Like I was saying, that I know people who actually did turn in the application for refugees during the Trump administration. They never heard anything from it, or even when they heard anything about them, some of them were told that they would, they done all the process, they did the interview, they went to what they call a medical checks and all of that, and yet they have not been able to come here or go elsewhere. So it's really taking a long time now than back then. Just to kind of add something to this question.
I went ahead and made it so that everybody can unmute themselves if they have a question rather than type it in the chat. So if anybody else has a question, just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask it.
Julia, I was really struck that Juanis came from such a difficult, terrible background. I mean, losing his parents, walking for miles and miles and miles across Africa, living for years in a camp. But when he got to the United States, he graduated from high school, which in itself would be an amazing thing, I would think.
Yes.
Somebody coming like you came. And then you managed to go through college, you got an honorary doctorate degree. I mean, do you want to talk about that at all? I mean, that to me is just...
Okay. Oh yeah, like you said that those of us, I remember that I was told people lost their lives just for education, for the sake of education, to be honest. You got some of the young men in the age of, 15, 16, and the late, teenager who would force themselves, because in those villages, there were no school. So they would force themselves travel with food, going to another country. And there would be attacks either by strangers or by animal. People die. I know, but remember I had a cousin that I lost. So for us, as a young generation, it was a huge dream for us to even possibly think about, be able to get access to schooling or education. So education was a big deal, was a major, imperative for all of us. We really wanted to go to school, and and even just finishing high school. I know most people, couldn't finish high school. So to me, it was one of those dreams that, that actually became a reality. That because I was really eager that I really wanted to finish high school. Even going to college was a major, was, was really impossible. But to be able to, to be able to go to the process of education, high school and college, which I talk about it in the book. It actually was really critical. It was really imperative, for me. So it was one of those dreams that came true, to be honest. And like I mentioned, I talk a little bit about the rescue, the angel, rescue. This was one of those stories. Remember, this was 1993 that I was with my auntie, my mom's sister, my first auntie, and I was always asking her, hey, ma, I call her mother. Hey, ma, why don't we go somewhere I really wanted to go to school? I would tell her day in and day out, so she didn't want to leave. So what happened? I had to make a decision. So I had to skip from her, from where she was. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to escape and hoping that maybe I would go to a different country. I would go to, a place where I would go to school. So I had to leave her. And that leaving her led me to almost die because of starvation. I was walking all day on foot. I was thirsty. I was, hungry, and I didn't have any. I didn't carry anything with me. It was just myself. And this was one of those journeys that had forced me to, to leave because of education. I really wanted to go to school back then, and good Lord led me to meet the right people. I met this young girl, young lady, on the road, and she was able to rescue me, where she invited me to go to her home and fed me. So it was one of those things that you couldn't imagine. So it was a huge deal. It was not just me. Almost young people, even people who were older than me.
I have a question related to that a little bit. How do people, you're talking about how you don't have, people don't even know that there's COVID. Like there's people who are so remote, they don't even know there's COVID. How does a person like that, or anybody like you, find out that you can even be a refugee? Like how do you get that information, and how do you find out how to fill out the whatever forms you need, like what agency you need to go talk to? I've always been wondering about that.
Well, yes. So most of us as refugees, these were people who were compelled, people who were really forced by, by conflicts or war or poverty. In most cases, 99% was because of the war that was going on or is still going on. When the villages or area were being attacked or bombarded, then people would say, well, maybe it was better to just leave, get out of there, get out of the house, get out of the village, get out of the, the area. And then when they get to refugees, you had people who already been dead for years, so where they did gain education. You know, they did have neither a high school or even if they didn't complete high school, so they were able to read and write and know the basic. You know, those were the people that helping the rest of the refugees who were new, kind of like a newcomer. You know, helping them where to go. And again, it just really varies on a camp. For example, in Kakuma, I remember in the 90s, what you would do, let's say you want to, you want to apply for resettlement, immigration resettlement. So you would go to the UN campus or camp or center, and then you would tell them that I want to apply for application or I want to apply for immigration settlement. And then if they were available, they would give you a form or they would help you fill it out. But in Ethiopia, it was different, and it's still different because we had so many refugees people there. Then the UN would give application to the chairman or to the chair of the of the camp, chairman, chairwoman, and the chairwoman would distribute it based on ethnic group that were in the camp. And they would give a certain number, let's say maybe 100 or 50 or 300, and then the tribal nation has a different segment, different clan. So different segment where they would start off from the largest segment to the bigger one. So it was even possible for you to even get one, because let's say you had, I remember there was like 500,000 refugees. So 500,000 refugees, let's say they were given 1,000 applications to apply for. 1,000, you split them based on, not just the number, the population, but it were also based on, and I like the way the refugees distributing them or contributing them, because there would be corruption or mismanagement, or the people on top would try to take them. But the way that were being done was that they would give them to tribal nation, let's say Nuer or Dinka or different group. Anyway, that's a long story. So,
I can tell you a little bit how the U.S. does it, because the United States does what's called circuit rides.
Yes.
And used to send out people to go to the camp and open interviews. So they would bring the applications with them, and they would interview people and take the applications back with them to make the decision, and then go back and do interviewing to decide.
So the way, yes, that's right. But before they go and interview people, there's the first step that they have to go through. So, for example, even though I don't remember all the detail with my situation, then so the camp, the chairman or the chairwoman of the camp said, "Hey, guys, we have this number of applications from the USA, from different groups. So let's say there were 1,000, or there were 500 or 200, and then those 200, the chairman and chairwoman would say, okay, those 200 would be given to each leader of that ethnic group or that tribe. And then, so the bottom line, to make it short, so when you get that form, you would fill it out and submitting it and give it to the chairwoman or to the people as kind of like a UN worker or staff. And then they would process, they would contact people here to say, okay, here are the names of the family or individual that apply. And then they would have to go to the, what they call NBA, before even these people, go there or went there to do the application. So there was an initial step that they had to go through them.
Refugees are simply the most vetted and scrutinized group of people, group of immigrants that enter this country. There are 17 different background checks that are done by U.S. Department of State, Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, National Security Agency. So we really know who refugees are when they're entering this country. And the numbers have just dropped dramatically since the Bush era, when we were resettling 120,000 refugees each year, to last year we brought in less than 15,000 people.
Jennifer, do you have an idea of how things are going to change under the Biden administration?
We're very hopeful that the numbers will go up rapidly, but we really probably won't know until September. Presidential determination may be taken out of the hands of the administration and placed into the hands of Congress, so that Congress would actually be able to decide how many refugees were able to enter the country. It's always been a very bipartisan program because it's a humanitarian program, and because our outcomes are so high. People get employed as soon as they get here or go to school, like this young man. So it's a very successful program, and it's been very well funded for decades, and it was unfortunately.
Can I say a couple of things?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I'm going to go back to the question you asked me about my experience, coming here. I mean, it's like I said, that something been happening. I don't know. It's almost everywhere I went across the United States. I always been bumping to the good people who care. But it's really different with different people. For example, with my cousin and his family who been here as refugees in Denver when they first got here. I don't remember what agency that they came through, but they were not really treated well as I and my in-law family that I came with in Connecticut. In other words, there were 6 of them, and they were put into 1 bedroom here in Colorado. They could barely even have, enough food to eat. So in other words, they were very struggling versus us, like in Connecticut, we were provided almost anything we needed, so the family were given a monthly, not a stipend, but a monthly, I don't know, what do you call it? Kind of like a month,
allowance.
Mm-hmm. To pay for rent and to pay for all this, stuff. So it's just very, like when we were in Minnesota, for example, it was a little different than Connecticut, and even when we were in Iowa or Omaha, Nebraska. So it just really depends on the state. I think maybe just each state had their own different policy, different laws, and the economy too. So we came at the time that the economy was the best. Even these refugees were getting jobs easily. Even though those jobs was not, viable in terms of, they were paying a minimum wage. Versus people who came later during the Bush, administration, even Obama. Obama thing will get better. I mean, thing will a little better. So it just really varies. I encountered a different situation where, yes, I really dealt with some, and I talk about that in the book too. Some sort of prejudices and and biases. But I mean, I would say that it was really rare. It was really in few situations. It was not like maybe some refugees, had gone through different difficulty times, not only during the economy, but even people they were encountered with. And then number 2, I want to make too, that I'm not actually, I'm not a doctor academically, but actually was honored the doctor I have was an honorary doctorate degree. So I haven't got my PhD yet. I want to make that correction. So I'm now working on obtaining my my MBA, master degree. So the doctor that you see on the book is an honorary doctor.
Well, I think we're about out of time. I hate to cut this off, but it's been so interesting. I've learned a lot. Julia, are there any more pressing questions that have come in that we need to take before we?
No, I think we're ready to close up. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, I just wanted to say, not only did I think this is really interesting and I learned a lot myself, but I just don't think any of us really, Dr. Lual, can imagine what you've gone through to get where you are today. It's really kind of beyond belief. And we look forward to your next books.
Seriously, yeah.
And we thank you so much. And we thank Jennifer and Julia also. If you found this chat as interesting as I did, please support Dr. Lual by buying a copy of his book, which is, as you can see here, Daring to Overcome. And it's available at this link that you can see at the website. Please also consider donating to support the work of Immigrant Pathways Colorado by going to our website, which is www.immigrantpathways.org, and clicking on Colorado Gives. Or you can send a check to us if you prefer. It's Immigrant Pathways Colorado, IPC, at P.O. Box 401. There it is on the screen. Littleton, Colorado 80160. And keep watching for the coming announcement of Immigrant Pathways' amazing new delicious international cookbook that if you've been following us, we will get a notice to you. It's called Together at the Table, Recipes from Our Cultural Heritage. And I can tell you, it's going to be really wonderful. We expect it about mid-March. So keep an eye out for that. And unless there's anything more from anybody, thank you for joining us tonight. Be safe, stay safe.
Well, can I say something real quick? Well, I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and to hear a little bit about my story. So, like I said, my journey is keep going. I keep grinding and keep going. So I'm looking for, volunteer, perhaps people who are expert on marketing the book, maybe can help with promoting the books, or perhaps even raising the money that I need for clinic projects and board projects. So we're always looking for friends who can join our team, our board, my advisory board, or just a volunteer, or people who want to travel. One of the things when we get back to normal, I'm sure we're going to be getting over this COVID-19 very soon, over the next 2, 3 months, 4 months. So by August, September, I think all of us are going to get back to normal. So if you ever thought about maybe travel to Africa, you want to join our team, you want to come, so you're welcome to do so. You want to volunteer, want to help, maybe get the word out with a book. I got more. So like I said, I'm working on 2 books right now, one of which is done, but I want to give this book a chance first. I want to make sure I see how it's doing before I release the other book. So thank you very much.
Well, you are an amazing example of what refugees bring to this country, the strengths, the interesting points of view, then just how you really strengthen our country. So thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. So you can see it.
I'll say good luck.
On Amazon too. I don't know. You can look it up. Daring to Overcome. It's on Amazon too.
Okay.
So, if you can spread the word, I appreciate it. Otherwise, maybe we will see each other again.
Soon, I hope. Take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. We appreciate you.
Thank you.